Everybody ready for Christmas? Yeah, me too, Kelly. I think I'm just about there. I'm off rest till the second, really till the sixth. I haven't wrapped them either, but I got them. They're all there. Gonna do that tomorrow. Gonna make a run to get some ice wine and Vincento and some stuff for some specialty cocktails tomorrow and clean the house a little bit. And yeah, go to jujitsu in the morning, lift weights, go for a run. I just don't have to work. That's the wonderful thing. Yeah, it's going to be by the fireplace on Christmas Eve. It's a little, I like it, right? We'll probably have something salty with it, like some prosciutto and different things like that. So yeah, we'll see. Y'all getting cabin or like holiday fever? Yeah, we have a good. It's a gas one, Sean, but just turn the switch on and heats up the whole downstairs and the upstairs. I hope it's cold enough to actually run it. So I just open the door and run it. That would figure it out one way or the other, right? All right, we've got about a minute left. We'll get started. Yeah, well, YouTube, or you can put it on like Roku on your TV above the YouTube. I actually put that on as the Yuletide log too, so we have the fireplace going and just that going. And I've got a Lo-Fi Beats cafe, and then I found a couple people under that I really like. That I'll play. I got Lo-Fi Beats Christmas music as well, but the kind of the cafe jazz and a couple of, in fact, the artist's name is Jaden Kamstra. Got some really neat stuff. Just good. Yeah, right. Well, if you're ever in the area, come by. We'll set you up. So, all right, everybody, let's get started. Questions on anything from last time? Diana Krall's good too, Kelly. Really good, actually. Might listen to some of her. We're going to talk about employee discipline systems tonight, page 133 through 156. Not a ton of content. We covered a lot the last couple times, so I'll give it a good go. Be judicious with our time. If you have not checked your email yet, I sent you an article I saw today on Fox News. I normally go through all the news just first thing in the morning across all areas to see what's out there. And there was a really interesting article I sent on the Teamsters call to strike at several Amazon facilities over pay. Well, a couple of really unique things. They feel they have leverage. It was several sites in California. However, evidently the Teamsters doesn't represent Amazon, so it's a jurisdictional strike in essence. Amazon could replace all the workers if they wanted to, and it wasn't all the distribution centers. So while there's a lot of workers, it's actually not as much leverage as they thought. Now, if every distribution work center worker went out across the country, that'd be a really big deal. So it's just an interesting article on what's going on based on literally what we are covering right now. So hopefully you got a chance to look at that. If not, check it out. I just thought it was really, really fascinating and good timing for what we literally just covered with the union stuff, right? I don't know how they could go on strike and the Teamsters doesn't even represent the workers. Interesting. So I'll have to, if I get more on that, I might Google it sort of tomorrow. I'll send you some information as well, but take a look. It's kind of an interesting read and get some context for you for what we what we literally have just got done studying. So, all right, so let's talk about employee discipline systems. And again, we're kind of agnostic here if this is a union or non-union environment. In essence, what you gotta, unfortunately, what we gotta have one of these in all areas. And you're always gonna have to discipline employees, right? So my advice is then have a written policy, but follow it. I was doing a little consulting work for a company that had no discipline systems, right? They had no performance review systems. They basically gave raises willy-nilly, or when someone complained because they wanted more money, they just gave it to them. That's just horrible, right? So having a disciplinary, because what they were doing was some people were getting disciplined for some things, others doing the same thing weren't, and you can't do that either, right? I mean, that's just a clear EEOC ticket to a lawsuit, right? So talk about having them. If you do have them well written, make sure legal has approved them, and go ahead and then follow, right? You got to follow what you put in there. So our learning objectives, we want to look at the components of employee discipline systems and really the concepts of administrative justice. And there's nothing earth-shattering that you're going to see in here, right? So we're looking at employee disciplinary systems, and I would hope the objective of a disciplinary action would be there to remedy a problem and really to help employees achieve success in their work. It's been called a hot stove, which is more of a union for administrating punishment, because basically it provides warning that those who disregard the warning will get burned, right? And so, we're going to give you warnings, we're going to give you that, but if you do something against that, then you're going to get punished, right? So 3 types of punishment: natural consequences, and this is at 100,000-foot level. Basically says behavior violates the laws of nature and society, right? So natural, you'd be punished for setting a fire, you'd be punished for killing somebody, right? Punished for hitting somebody in the office, punished for taking data, not using that right? Logical consequences, punishment has a logical relationship to the violation. Punishment should fit the crime. If you're late once, 5 minutes in 5 years, you're not going to be fired for that, right? So again, not necessarily an eye for an eye, but if you're late, 5-10 minutes, and you've done it over 100 days in the month, and we keep talking to you about it, and you're supposed to be on the phone at 8, and you get there at 8:05 every day, yeah, that's going to be a problem. Then you're going to probably have some logical consequences to that. And then there's contrived consequences, where punishment is unrelated to the behavior and therefore is least effective. Just basically being punished for anything, even though you didn't do it, probably not going to end very well. So normally we're looking at that combination of the natural and the logical types of punishment. And again, much like negotiations, where you can have negotiations that are we're gonna just win at all costs and beat you into submission, or we're gonna have that integrated bargaining, right? Where we're going to have a win-win situation. At the end of the day, you got to run a company, right? So you might as well get along with the union, win-win. Well, same thing with punishment, right? And you all probably can understand or have been part of or seen both of these, right? Negative approach is what it sounds like, right? It is really about retribution, fear of God. If you mess up, we are coming down hard on you. And we're not only coming down hard on you with punishment, you're going to know it. We're going to yell at you. There's going to be temper, right? Maybe threats. You do that again, I'm going to run you out in front of everybody and dress you down in front of the organization. The goal is to severely punish people, or frankly, just terminate them and set them up as an example for others. That's why they used to do public, right, hangings and executions back in the 15th century, right? In the 1400s, 1500s, was look what happened, right? People were caught doing XYZ, don't do that. This will happen to you, right? Same type of thing. And at the end of the day, how's that work? Probably not well, right? You've probably been in organizations that did it or had it done to you. It's just not going to end well, right? People are going to probably get out of there at all costs, the good ones, or they're certainly not going to give a high level of engagement or effort. And then you got the positive approach. And that really is about, hey, if there are issues, let's try to correct them. right? And let's try to eliminate that going forward. At the end of the day, you've invested a lot of time and money in people, right? Don't you want to try to see if you can make that work? Um, it's really just a discussion of here's what happened, here was the errors, why it's unacceptable, and how do we fix it? And you want to rehabilitate the employee. And those people normally in that area respond, become good employees. Those who don't then will go on to be terminated. Give me an example how we try to approach this. When I was working in the call center, we ended up having just uh and you will anyway, but a really high turnover. And I'm like, man, this is rough, right? So we came up with a couple approaches. We had a flex 15 that as long as you were there within 15 minutes of your start time and you're going to be late, let us know that you could flex that time. You just added 15 minutes on to the end of your shift. And that worked really well, right? That cut down a whole bunch of issues. Now, if there was a big traffic accident and somebody called in, okay, I get it. I-20's closed. We'll get it. But, just sometimes the traffic, some days I can take my daughter to school at the same time 3 times that week, and one time takes me 20 minutes, one takes me 6, right? It just happens. So we did that. And the other thing was what we told employees that were like written up or something going on that they had errors or something. We said, here's what we'll do. If you have no further issues with this situation, or no other issues at all within a 6-month period of time, right? We will pull that instance out of your file. And if it is your first one, it'll be like that never existed. We'll literally just rip it up in front of you and do it. And that worked really well. We probably had a 75% reduction in turnover because of the Flex 15 and that process. We did have people that came to us in 6 months and said, hey, I haven't had this issue, take it out of my file. I'm like, yeah, but you had 6 other issues, being late, past the Flex 15 or whatever. That wasn't the deal. The deal was no more on this or anything, we'll take it out, right? So those who responded became really good employees. They appreciated it. Those who didn't, well, then they went down the path, right? So again, now if you are having a lot of turnover and performance issues, right? You need to probably look at your policies, but you also probably need to go back and look at, how are we hiring? Did we hire the right people in the first place, right? And so when you do have an issue that situation where you want or you need, right, by definition, that progressive disciplinary system, right? And so again, at the end of the day, if you look at this, and it's a iteration, right? We had like first verbal warning, second verbal warning, we had first, second, third written warning, final written warning, and then termination, right? Well, verbal warning, it's really just that discussion, which I never really understood that. Because at the end of the day, it's a verbal warning, but you documented the whole thing and put it in the file. So it's really a written warning. I just never, that just to me was stupid. It should just be, your first written warning, second, third. But anyway, nomenclature, just that never makes sense to me. Maybe you go to a verbal reprimand, might get a written reprimand, suspension, discharge. So, a couple things here. I first thought, well, we have companies, and my company being that way, that we're giving them all these steps to really turn them around. And that was half true. Okay. Yes, we do want to give them a chance to turn around because we have invested a lot in them and that's expensive. So we wanted to do it. But the other 50% was we don't want to get sued, right? Let's say someone does something and we get rid of them too quick, right? They may file a charge. Would you give them enough time? So really it was about let's not get sued either. But at the end of the day, you've got a process, and at some point, you have to put the stick in the ground and say, look, no more, because you got other employees watching it. Right. I was just talking to our master instructor at the Taekwondo studio. I said, I got a beef with you, and you've got a 37-year-old fifth Dan black belt. Okay. That is like a lot of accomplishment. You put him on the competition team where everybody in that competition is 13 years or younger. some are black belts. My daughter's a high green belt, green review. But I said, your fifth degree comes in, checks in for class, sits down on the bench with his wife while they're out doing the drills, starts laughing at him when they're struggling, and then gets up to come in when it's time to spar for the last 10 minutes of class because that's what he likes to do. I'm like, you're setting the exact wrong example, right? Those kids are looking up to him and they're like, well, I don't, I'm just teaching that I don't want to do what I don't want to do. I don't have to. You're not going to do anything to me. I said, that's wrong. I disagree with it. And she's not doing anything about it. We're leaving. I'm like, I got to stick up for what's right. I'll just go somewhere else because that's wrong. Same thing you're doing here. Other employees are going to look at it. Now, at the end of the day, when they don't tell you what's the one line that you always put in a verbal warning all the way up through suspension, right? What anybody the tried and true HR that go line or phrase or statement that goes into every conversation about discipline. Anybody want to take a guess or know what I'm talking about? Up to including termination. You got it, Faye. Right? Yeah, same thing. May lead to separation. Any further violation of this or other issues, you may face further disciplinary action up to including termination. May lead to separation. Any of that. Why do you do it? Well, at the end of the day, let's say you've got two employees and the other one employee, they get in a fight, hauls off with a bat and beats the other employee. Well, you're not going to take them through a verbal written warning, verbal reprimand, written warning, suspension, discharge. You're just going to get rid of them, right? Clear and cut. So letting people know that at the end of the day, right, this is a process that we follow. However, there can be further, you know, disciplinary actions up to including termination. Questions on any of that? This is the part of that job I hate the most because I just hate these conversations. Um, Half the time, I just want to tell the people if you just put half the effort you do into trying to get out of your job or screw around, if you put half that effort in just doing your job right, you'd be really good. So I don't have a lot of patience for that. So probably would never have guessed that. All right, I'll keep going. I don't see any comments or questions. So the concept of administrative justice, okay? Think of it this way, a system of administrative justice has evolved over time. And in most organizations, it's generally accepted and formally adopted by, in a union environment, the collective agreement in many union contracts, so the contract, right? So two basic concepts supporting administrative justice are due process and just cause. And this is kind of an important concept in our legal system here in the United States, or it has been for most of the time. Due process describes the disciplinary actions that must follow an accepted procedure that protects an employee from arbitrary, capricious, or unfair treatment. Okay. So, basically punishment fits the crime and we're going to investigate it and not jump to conclusions. And just cause are the disciplinary actions, right, that should only be taken for good and sufficient reasons, right? You're not going to fire somebody on hearsay that they got into a fight. You're going to investigate it, right? And so you're not going to just now. I say that if you remember back to the at will state, you can fire anybody at any time for any reason, right? So just cause doesn't necessarily come into play. Point being, if you do that, you are going to probably end up with an EEOC charge or in a lawsuit, even though there was valid reasons for it. Most of the time, the courts are going to gonna side with the employee. So due process, gonna take the time to investigate it, let you have your say, and then just cause is that we're going to have that punishment really based on some element of that. Okay. So if you think about effective disciplinary systems, and not all are, right? If they are effective, you have to have the right processes in place and they have to be executed. executed's a bad word, right? Talk about discipline. They have to be engaged and facilitated in the right way. Okay. So the following, we've got what, 9 principles here, describe some of the most important elements of an effective disciplinary system. The first one is that you've got a definite policy and procedure. Okay. That you have that policy and procedure, that employees understand the policy and procedure, and then that you are facilitating that in the spirit of what's written, and you're being fair with it. If you make changes to the policy or the procedure, you do need to make sure employees understand it and sign off on it. Otherwise, they, now at the end of the day, you can say, look, you got to read the employee manual, sign off, you signed it, that you read it and understand it. People do it. Do they always do it? Of course not. But right, if you go to do something, go, well, that's not fair. I didn't know. Well, you signed off that you read the policy. It was. So making sure that's done. 2, assigning supervisory responsibility in applying discipline. Okay. So sometimes that best comes from the leader of the person. HR should be involved with that, of course. It's communicating, or the communication of rules, so that employees know what they're accountable for and what the consequences are disobeying. Just talked about that. Good burden of proof, that should exist, which enforces company officials to investigate first and discipline second. Can't do it in hearsay, right? What if another employee just didn't like a supervisor employee? They made something up ugly, right? You got to have that burden of proof. Bring me the facts and let me investigate it. Consistent treatment through the workforce to ensure the system is free of discrimination. Okay, so you need to make sure that your leaders are trained and understand, what what the policy is, and that they're doing it the same, not only for the members of their team, but that the teams across the board are doing the same. Now, you might have some people that write people up for being late the first time, others not. Maybe that's more just a compassionate leader versus non. It still gets you in trouble, right? How are we administrating that? Is that consistent treatment? Consideration of the circumstances, right? If there was a big accident and the interstate was closed down and that's how most people got to work, can't write them up for being late. I can't help it that you sat out there for 2 hours. What are you supposed to know? There's an accident, so you leave 2 hours early, right? So there could be circumstances that would circumvent the policy. Reasonable rules and penalties, and statute of limitations, which is commonly 3 to 5 years after a reprimand was first made. Can't come back 5 years later and say, well, I'm accusing such of sexual harassment. Can't do that, right? And if you remember back to our EOC, it was like 180 days of the instance, right, that you had to bring that up, or it was basically the statute of limitations. And the interesting one, that last one, number 9 there in whatever, gold, right? Goldenrod, marigold, whatever, is the Weingarten rights. And this is only in unionized companies. And Weingarten is the right of an employee to have union representation present during an investigatory interview. Okay. Employees have Weingarten rights only during investigatory interviews when a supervisor questions an employee to obtain information that could be used as a basis for discipline or ask an employee to defend his or her contract. Management is not required to inform the employee of his or her Weingarten rights. If they are in a union contract, they need to know that. The union needs to let them know. If you are being questioned, you invoke your Weingarten right. So it's the employee's responsibility to know and request to know and request. And then upon request, the employer must stop that interview until the union rep is there. If you remember any of the Law and Order episodes where Internal Affairs would investigate an officer and they started asking questions, they said, no, I want my union rep. And IA couldn't do anything until the union rep showed up, normally an attorney in that case. That'd be the Weingarten right. They knew that those cops were under contract. They had a right to bring that in, and then the questioning had to stop. Again, employees need to know it. Unions need to educate them. Management does not. It's not like Miranda. If I'm going to arrest you, I got to tell you that. Well, I don't have to tell you you've got the right to do that. You just need to know it. But if you invoke it, then I've got to, the people have to back off. And that's only in interviews where you feel you're being interrogated, right, on your behavior or could incriminate yourself in something. Questions on the Weingarten rights? All right. Which of the following is not part of an effective disciplinary system? The rules should be communicated to all employees. The responsibility to initiate disciplinary action should be delegated to the employee relations specialist. The organization should have definite policies and procedures, or employees should receive consistent treatment. Which one is not part of an effective disciplinary system? Kind of a layup here on this one. Which of the following is not part of an effective disciplinary system? It's B, the responsibility to initiate disciplinary action should be delegated to the employee's relations specialist. No, should be with the manager. Now, should they invoke HR? Absolutely. But they shouldn't just wait for HR to discover there was an issue. They have to bring that to them. I've got this issue going on. I got an employee in the change I make being really passive aggressive. I just talked to her about it the day before and she acted like a fool on Friday with one of her peers. I get into HR, said, can't handle that. Here's what I want to do. Help me understand my rights. Thank God she's on vacation this week. So I was furious, absolutely furious. I will end up, because of it, I will take the positive approach. I might not have taken that had she not been on vacation. I would have probably just jumped into that Monday and not been really happy about it. Well, Kelly, that's the other thing, right? In a lot of organizations, performance improvement plan is a track out the door, right? It just is. Some they are made to try to help the person get better, but you're right. If you're not following up on that with the employee or the manager, then employees quickly realize, yeah, go ahead, do whatever. Right? We're not going to follow. It doesn't mean anything. So it's kind of like engagement surveys. If you give an engagement score and you don't follow up the employees with the results, they don't do good. If you do follow up with the results of the employees, and then you say you're going to work on action plans and you don't do it, then you're just better off not doing it at all, right? And tips are kind of the same way. And 10 pages left, right? This is going to be kind of a quick lesson tonight, not a lot of really in-depth content. And so we're going to look at individual employment rights. And we want to define employment at will, that doctrine, and its relationship to implied contracts, and differentiate between various mischievous reasons leading to employee dismissal and appropriate recourse. We could all probably collectively write a book on that. And so here's a big deal. Employee handbooks, right? They're virtually all online right now. Describe the important aspects of the employment relationship the employees need to know, right? So the literature that's used in the handbook is especially critical in certain reference terms, things like permanent employment, different things like that. So a couple things on employee handbooks. You do not have to have an employee handbook. The law, government does not say you must have an employee handbook. However, what the law does say, if you have an employee handbook, then you must follow the policies in that handbook. If you don't, right, then they become a problem. Okay, so don't have to have one, but if you do, you need to follow it. 2, I would implore you to, anytime you write an employee handbook or language, always have counsel, either internal or external, that deals with labor law. Read that handbook and make darn sure that your good intent does not run afoul of the law. And what do I mean by that? I'll give you a great example. I literally ran into it with a student, and it's called implied contracts. And an implied, let me come to this one first and I'll come back. An implied contract is either an oral or written promise by an employer to continue the employment relationship either indefinitely or for a designated period of time. Okay. An example of an employee contract is this statement in employee handbook that the policy of the company is that non-probationary employees will not be released except for just cause. If you come in and you all of a sudden do a reduction in force, then that is an implied contract. Wait a minute, you said just cause, which is termination based on performance. You are just shortening the staff up. We got an implied contract, right? Other things are, right, you might refer to full-time job as steady jobs or permanent jobs. Okay. Well, those are two different things. Full-time employment and permanent are different. I actually had this come up with persons like, oh my gosh, in our employee manual, we refer to full-time jobs as permanent. They meant 8 hours a day. I said, if you fire anybody, right, now, obviously, if even in the case, if it's like for a disciplinary thing, they can come back and say, but this job is permanent. You can't get rid of me. And you know what? The courts are gonna side. There's gonna be a big settlement there. Or even steady jobs. If it's a steady job and you get laid off, well, wait a minute, that's not steady. So, right, make sure that whatever you have in your employment handbook is gone over by legal, because small words can get you. Oral contracts could be the same way. When I was interviewing for the job I have now at my day company, being a consultant, um, my boss said, great place to work. No one ever gets fired or laid off around here. And I was literally teaching this very thing at that time. And I thought, oh my God, he just gave me an implied contract. Now, here's the deal. No one else was in the room. So it was he said, she said type of thing, right? He said. But I'm like, that's an implied contract. No one ever gets laid off or fired in this company. Well, now, in fairness, we have never laid anybody off. Have people gone away? Absolutely. But that was an employed contract. If they would happen to do layoffs, and that was in writing, that's going to go to the court. There will be a settlement, right? Because that is just pretty cut and dry. You've got the other concept then of the employment at will doctrine. And employment at will allows both the employer and the employee the mutual right to terminate the employer relationship at any time for any reason, with or without advance notice to the other. There are three public exceptions to the employment will doctrine. It's public policy, implied contract, which we just covered, right, and covenant of good faith. And those exceptions are very state specific. Promissory estoppel is another kind of an implied contract, but this is when an employee has relied on a promise that was implied by the employer, and this reliance consequently injured the employee financially and or professionally. So they might say, Chris or Sue, we're going to make you a manager. You're going to be a manager within 12 months. 12 months comes, Sue, we're going to make you manager, but it's going to take another 12 months. 5 years later, you're still telling Sue she's going to be a manager. Sue can come back and sue you like, look, I stopped searching for other jobs or other opportunities because you gave me a promise that I was going to be a manager, and that never happened, and I don't have any performance issues. And the employment at will is you can walk in and I can say, tomorrow I'm done. You're out. See ya. And that's it. You're gone, right? Now, if you've got a contract, I'm going to pay you out for that contract, but you're going to go away. As an employee, I can come in tomorrow and say, I'm out, and walk out. Now, if you've got a contract and non-compete, right, you can't go work for a competitor, but you can just walk out the door, right? Now, that you probably broke a contract and you're probably not going to have to pay you for it, but you can do that. Right? Now, I don't encourage that, right? Even though that's law in 68% of the states in the United States. Probably going to be some legal follow-up with both of those. All right, our knowledge check. The idea that employers can dismiss their employees for good cause, no cause, or even for causes that are morally wrong. I don't like the color of your hair. I don't like your height. Don't like how you dress, right? Those type of things. Without breaking the law is called progressive discipline, just cause termination, reserved rights theory, or employment at will. Yeah, right. We just covered it. The idea that employers can dismiss employees for good cause, for no cause, even for causes that are morally wrong without breaking the law is called employment at will. All right, pretty straightforward. Questions on any of that before we finish up here with a couple more? All right, probably about as ready to be done too, right? So, retaliatory discharge, pretty straightforward. Retaliatory discharge is basically saying if an employee does something like files a workers' compensation claim, they might have filed a sexual harassment claim. Maybe they filed a claim with OSHA for an unsafe working condition. You cannot retaliate against that person for that action. Now, this is something that I've run into, that you've had less than stellar employees or employees that may have some character flaws get purposefully written up for something, right? And they're like, you know what? They can't touch me for anything, and that's retaliation. And so they just go on a spree of this, that, and the other thing. Or they might, even better yet, file a charge of discrimination or an OSHA complaint or a workers' compensation claim. And they think, hey, because I've done it, I know there can't be backlash or retaliation. I am going to do what I want. And all of a sudden they stop coming to work on time. Their work goes downhill. Well, guess what? They're wrong. You cannot retaliate against somebody or fire somebody for what they filed a charge on, but you can certainly hold them accountable for doing their job, and you can terminate them for, you know, failure to perform if it follows your policy. So that being said, make sure your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed, but you don't not have to not um hold an employee accountable to continuing to do their job and doing it well. Another type of discharge is called constructive discharge, and constructive discharge is basically when an employer creates unpleasant working conditions that an employee will quit. Right? It is usually targeted to people over the age of 40. It can be targeted towards specific, if there is a discrimination basis. And what you're trying to do is get rid of people without breaking the law or doing that. I'll give you a great example of this. Had a boss once that she was a younger VP, but kind of crazy, right? Everything revolved around her, and she was the type that if you, oh, I thought this was for everybody, but if you had a typo in an email, she would print it, circle it, call it out, scan it, and send it back to you. Okay. Or she would email back and point it out. I'm like, really? That's what you do as a VP? All right. Um, there were times that we would be in meetings and, Chris, go get me a cup of coffee, or Keith, go pick up lunch. And I'm like, that's kind of weird, right? And then our weekly report had to go in at noon on Friday. And the what we were told was the executive team needed that report by 11 o'clock on Sunday night because they all stayed up and read it to be ready to go for the next day. And well, you're just full of crap, right? I'm telling you, I know the executive team, no one's staying up Sunday night, 11 o'clock, reading that crap before Monday. They're executives, they don't have to. 10 o'clock on Sunday night. Yeah, exactly, Susan. Oh, it gets better. 10 o'clock on Sunday night, the phone would start ringing, buzzing, emails, text, asking questions about that weekly report every Sunday night. And I finally brought it up once, and what we discovered was all the white males over 50 were getting emails sent with their typos. We were the three that were being sent to pick up lunch in the rain, get our coffee, and we were the three that were getting called on Sunday night about our weekly report. No one under 40, none of the females. Okay. And I'm like, okay, well, she pulled that crap one Sunday night too often. And I got on the phone. I said, I've been asleep for 2 hours. You do this every Sunday night. I have that thing into you by Friday morning, well ahead of noon. If you can't get your stuff together on Friday, I'm not wasting my Sunday night. And I know this is constructive discharge. I am going to file a charge at the EOC and the CHRO. Part of your shit. Part of it. And this is discrimination. And she was so flabbergasted she couldn't get away. I said, I know exactly what you're doing. And it stops now. And we all know it, right? That's constructive discharge. Now, if you need to call me on Sunday because we got a big presentation 8 o'clock on Monday, you got questions, something going on, I get it. I'm all in with you. But yeah, no executive. And then her weekly report on top of it was so full of errors and typos. I'm like, how dare you pull that crap when you're anyway, you get the point, right? Lived it, and I had enough. I'm like, my wife's like, well, you don't call around on it. I will. I said, oh, I'm going to. But again, not breaking the law, not doing it for everybody, trying to make it uncomfortable, so leave. Nope, I'm going away. You're going to give me a lot of money. So, knowledge check. An illustration of constructive discharge is A, what Chris just told you. No. A, firing incompetent laborers. B, laying off the least senior employees. C, terminating minority employees. D, assigning unpleasant work to older workers to make them resign. Wonder what that answer is. I still get, that's been like 7 years ago. I still get it just boils my blood. She was the type that she would also say when we get, anytime she comes see you, because she was on the executive team, and boy, her ego was like, we flew the company jet down here. I don't care if you rode a donkey. Who cares? You're the same person that went to the airport to fly to Los Angeles and your flight left the day before and you missed it. So luckily you got to the airport. Or we were at our senior gatherings and she'd walk with her team, go, we drink better wine than you do. They give us the really good stuff, not what you guys drink. It's like, why would you say that to somebody? And at the end of the day, that's what you think. You're not. But anyway, I so kind of see what I'm dealing with there. Glad I'm not there anymore. Common tort law theories is basically a wrongful act or injury done willfully, negligently, or in circumstances in which people, their property, or their reputations are harmed. This is really where mistreated employees can sue the employer, not in criminal, but in civil court. And there's a much more liberal definition of what you can sue for and interpretation of the law. And it's really based on prior decisions, so what they would really call case law. Defamation is really the definition of making slanderous or liberal or libelous statements about a person that harm the person's reputation or credibility. Okay. So to prove a case of defamation, a person must show evidence that A, there was false or malicious statements made to another person, either verbally or in writing, that the person was harmed by the statement, and that there was no legitimate business reason for the statement to be made. And in social media circles now, this becomes much larger. It's just vindictive. I don't like the person, so I'm going to just try to screw them past being here. So they can't get a job. They might give defamation and they can sue. So again, to prove that, person must show evidence that there was false or malicious statements made to another person. It can either be verbally or in writing, so somebody had to hear it or read it. Social media, big problem. The person was harmed by this statement. Okay, so they either couldn't get another job or of the like, and that there was no legitimate business reason for the statement to be made. Non-compete agreements, actually in many states now, these are not legal anymore, but for your test, that won't show up for like the next 2 or 3 years. So non-compete agreements is really a restrictive covenant designed to protect the business interest. So basically what happens, you see most of these at a senior or an executive level. I'm going to hire a new senior vice president of sales. We're going to sign a non-compete. Going to say within 5, you cannot leave and go to work for a competitor, right? So if you break your contract, you can't go to the competitor. If we fire you, you cannot go to work for a competitor for if you leave in year 1, you got a 5-year deal, you cannot go to work for that competitor, a competitor for 4 more years. Now, normally when a non-compete is signed then, right, the worker will say, I'm willing to sign that. However, if I leave after year 1, regardless if I leave or somebody or you get rid of me, you still owe me for 5 years. Since I can't go to work for a competitor, then you have to pay me out that contract. Non-competes, the criteria must be neither generally known in the trade nor readily ascertainable. Not necessarily, right? I mean, is it a legal agreement? Sure. If people know, everyone probably figures most people have non-competes. Again, I'm not sure. I get why they've been outlawed, but I think that opens up a whole nother realm of issues. I think what it is going to do is force employers to pay people bonuses so they stay versus just running to the next gig. Now there might be a non-compete that can't be, they can still have a confidentiality agreement about what they've learned here, so that's still intact. 2, it must have been developed at the employer's expense, must provide the employer with competitive advantage, and the employer must generally strive to keep it confidential. However, right, it said no one's going to sign a non-compete unless they're getting something in return for that, and normally that is guaranteed contract. Knowledge check, last one, and we're done. In order to prove a case of defamation, an employee must present all of these except which of the following for evidence: that there was no legitimate business reason for the statement to be made. Others believe that the statement to be true, a false or malicious statement was made to another person, or the person was harmed by the statement. What say you? Which one of those does not matter, is not part of that? Yeah, B, right? Others believe the statement true. Does not matter if somebody believed to be true or not, right? It just doesn't matter. You can't do that, right? So that is that. All right. Again, we won a whole lot. We had a whole bunch last on Monday. Not quite as much tonight. Questions before I let you go, and we'll see you again on the 6th. Merry Christmas and happy holidays and happy New Year in between. Hope you all have a very nice holiday season with friends and family and get some time off. And with that, I don't see any questions. I am around. If you're catching up, you got some, email me, check that quite a bit. Glad to engage. Just want to get away from it for 2 weeks. I recommend that too. And we will bring this home strong through pretty much the rest of January. All right, everybody, have a great time and know you're appreciated and stay well and stay safe.